The emergency klaxon at Ramstein Air Base pierced the morning air as Jam Kowalski dropped her wrench and looked up from the engine she was servicing. What happened in the next half hour would expose a secret she had been hiding for 12 years and prove that some skills are impossible to forget, even after spending over a decade pretending they never existed. Before we continue, tell us where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, make sure to subscribe as I've got something extra special saved for tomorrow. Jam Kowalski was exactly where she wanted to be, invisible. For the past 4 years, she had worked as a civilian aircraft mechanic at Ramstein Air Base in Germany, maintaining the fleet of transport planes that kept the base operational. With her black hair always pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her small frame often hidden under oversized coveralls, she blended seamlessly into the background of the massive military installation. Her co-workers knew her as the quiet Polish girl who had immigrated to Germany as a teenager, the one with an almost supernatural ability to diagnose engine problems, but who never spoke about her past. She arrived early, worked efficiently, and left promptly at the end of her shift. No one questioned why someone so young had such an intuitive understanding of aircraft systems, or why she sometimes corrected senior mechanics with an authority that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than technical manuals. Jam preferred it that way. She had spent the last 12 years carefully constructing this unremarkable identity, learning to suppress the instincts that had once made her exceptional. When she watched the F-22 Raptors take off from the base's main runway, she forced herself to look away, ignoring the familiar ache in her chest that reminded her of who she used to be. This morning had started like any other. She was performing routine maintenance on a C-130 transport plane, checking hydraulic systems with the methodical precision that made her supervisors trust her with the base's most critical aircraft. The work was satisfying in its simplicity, predictable problems with predictable solutions. Nothing like the split-second decisions and impossible maneuvers that had once defined her life. Her supervisor, Master Sergeant Frank Muller, approached her workstation, carrying a clipboard and wearing the expression of someone dealing with an unexpected crisis. At 45, Muller was a career military man who had seen enough emergencies to know when something was seriously wrong. Kowalski, he called, his German accent thick with stress. "We need to talk." Jam looked up from the engine compartment, wiping grease from her hands with a rag that had seen better days. "What's wrong?" "We've got a situation developing," Muller said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. NATO exercise Crimson Thunder was supposed to be a routine training mission. 4 F-22s, a standard air superiority demonstration for visiting dignitaries. Jam nodded, not understanding why this concerned her. The F-22 pilots trained regularly, and their exercises rarely involved the maintenance crew beyond pre-flight checks. "We lost contact with Raptor 3, Muller continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The emergency transponder indicates the pilot ejected over the Black Forest. Search and rescue is en route, but there's a problem." The familiar knot of anxiety that Jam had learned to ignore began forming in her stomach. What kind of problem? The exercise isn't just a demonstration. There's a high-value intelligence package aboard Raptor 3, encrypted data that NATO's been tracking for months. If that aircraft falls into the wrong hands, Muller didn't finish the sentence, but Jam understood the implications. "So what does that have to do with me?" she asked, though part of her already knew the answer would change everything. Muller's expression grew grim. "The remaining 3 F-22s need to locate and secure that aircraft before anyone else does. But here's the thing, the pilot who ejected was supposed to be carrying the mission's navigation codes. Without those codes, the search area covers over 200 square kilometers of dense forest." Jam felt her carefully constructed world beginning to shift beneath her feet. "I still don't understand what this has to do with aircraft maintenance." "It doesn't," Muller said quietly, "but it has everything to do with the fact that we need someone who can fly an F-22 at a moment's notice. And our backup pilot called in sick this morning with food poisoning." The words hit Jam like a physical blow. She took a step backward, shaking her head instinctively. "I'm a mechanic, Sergeant. I don't fly planes." Muller studied her face with the intensity of someone who had spent decades reading people. "Funny thing, Kowalski, I've been watching you for 4 years. The way you understand these aircraft, the way you talk about flight dynamics, the way you instinctively know how every system works together. Most mechanics learn planes from the ground up. You understand them like someone who's lived inside them. Jam's hands began to tremble slightly, a reaction she hoped Mueller wouldn't notice. I just read a lot of technical manuals. Maybe, Mueller said, pulling out a tablet and showing her a series of official documents. Or maybe it has something to do with the fact that when I ran a deeper background check on you this morning, I found some very interesting gaps in your documentation. The tablet screen showed Jam's employment records, visa applications, and educational certificates. Everything looked normal, exactly as she had carefully arranged years ago. But Mueller scrolled to a section she'd never seen before, a series of classified database queries that had been flagged for manual review. According to this, Jam Kowalski didn't exist before age 13, Mueller said quietly. No birth records, no early education documentation, no family registration in any Polish database. It's like you materialized out of thin air as a teenager. Jam's mouth went dry. She had been so careful, so thorough in creating her civilian identity, but she had never considered that someone might look deeper than the standard background checks required for base employment. People lose documents, she said weakly. Refugees, displaced families. That's what I thought too, Mueller interrupted. Until I started wondering why a refugee with no formal aviation training could diagnose engine problems that stumped mechanics with 20 years of experience. The emergency klaxon that had started the morning's crisis chose that moment to sound again. 3 short blasts that indicated an immediate tactical response was required. Mueller's radio crackled to life with urgent communications from the control tower. Sergeant Mueller, we need that backup pilot airborne in 15 minutes. The weather window for search and rescue is closing fast. Mueller looked at Jam with an expression that mixed suspicion, desperation, and something that might have been understanding. Kowalski, I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need you to be straight with me. Have you ever flown a fighter aircraft? Jam stared at him, feeling the weight of 12 years of carefully maintained lies pressing down on her shoulders. In the distance, she could hear the sound of F-22 engines spinning up for emergency launch, the sound that had once been the soundtrack to her life, the sound she had been running from ever since. The next few minutes would determine whether Jam's carefully constructed anonymity could survive or whether the crisis unfolding around them would force her to confront the identity she had been hiding for over a decade. Mueller's radio crackled again, this time with the voice of Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the base commander. Mueller, what's the status on that backup pilot? We've got a narrow search window, and 3 F-22s are sitting on the tarmac waiting for their 4th. Mueller keyed his radio while maintaining eye contact with Jam. Colonel, we're still working on the situation. Work faster, Sergeant. Every minute we delay increases the risk of that intelligence falling into hostile hands. As Mueller spoke with his superiors, Jam found herself studying the F-22s visible through the hangar's open bay doors. Even from a distance, she could see the pilots going through their pre-flight checks, their movements crisp and purposeful. It had been 12 years since she had sat in a cockpit like that. 12 years since she had felt the incredible power of a fighter jet responding to her commands. She forced herself to look away, focusing instead on the C-130 she had been working on. Safe, predictable, grounded. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Everything she had tried to become, Kowalski, Mueller said, ending his radio conversation. I'm going to tell you what I think is happening here, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Jam remained silent, her hands unconsciously gripping the wrench she had been holding when the crisis began. I think you're not who you say you are, Mueller continued. I think those gaps in your documentation aren't accidents or bureaucratic oversights. I think you've been deliberately hiding from something or someone for a very long time. The accuracy of his assessment made Jam's chest tighten. She had underestimated the senior NCO's investigative instincts. More importantly, Mueller went on, I think you have skills that you're not telling us about. Skills that might be exactly what we need right now. Before Jam could respond, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, the squadron commander for the F-22 unit, strode into the hangar. At 40, Harrison had the bearing of someone who had spent his career in high-stakes situations, and the tension radiating from him was palpable. Mueller, Mueller, please tell me you found us a pilot, Harrison said without preamble. We've just received intelligence that unfriendly elements may be moving toward the crash site. We need to be airborne in 10 minutes, or this whole operation becomes infinitely more complicated. Mueller, Mueller glanced at Jam, then back at Harrison. Sir, I may have identified a possible solution, but it's unconventional. Harrison followed Mueller's gaze to Jam, taking in her mechanic's coveralls and grease-stained hands. Please tell me you're not suggesting what I think you're suggesting. Colonel, Mueller said carefully, what if I told you that Miss Kowalski here might have more aviation experience than her current job title indicates? Jam felt the conversation spiraling beyond her control. Sergeant Mueller, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Have you ever been in the cockpit of a fighter aircraft? Harrison interrupted, his tone sharp with urgency. The direct question hung in the air between them. Jam could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of 12 years of hidden truth pressing against her carefully constructed walls. She could lie, maintain her cover, and watch as the situation deteriorated around them. Or she could admit to knowledge that would expose everything she had been hiding. Yes, she said quietly, the word escaping before she could stop it. Harrison's expression shifted immediately. What kind of aircraft? Jam closed her eyes, feeling the last of her defenses crumbling. F-16s, F-18s, F-22s. How many hours? Enough. Harrison exchanged a look with Mueller that spoke volumes about the desperation of their situation. Ms. Kowalski, I'm going to ask you a series of technical questions. Your answers will determine whether we're having a very different conversation in the next few minutes. Over the following minutes, Harrison rapid-fired questions about F-22 flight systems, weapons configurations, and emergency procedures. Despite herself, Jam found herself answering with an authority and precision that made both men stare at her in amazement. Thrust vectoring engagement protocols in a low-altitude search pattern. Reduce throttle to 75%. Engage vectoring at 15-degree intervals. Maintain 200 feet altitude separation from terrain using ground-following radar. Emergency communication backup if primary systems fail. Switch to UHF guard frequency 243.0. Use emergency transponder code 7700. Maintain heading toward designated recovery coordinates. Weapons safety protocols during a reconnaissance mission. Master arm switch remains in safe position unless a direct threat is identified. Weapon selector in training mode. Confirm IFF-friendly codes before any engagement authorization. With each answer, Jam felt pieces of her old identity reasserting themselves. The knowledge was still there, intact after 12 years of forced dormancy. The muscle memory, the instincts, the split-second decision-making processes that had once defined her, all of it waiting just beneath the surface of her carefully maintained civilian facade. Harrison's radio crackled with an update from the control tower. Colonel Harrison, we've detected unidentified vehicles moving toward the crash site. Estimated arrival time, 35 minutes. Harrison looked at Jam with an expression that mixed professional assessment with something approaching desperation. Miss Kowalski, I'm going to make this very simple. We have 3 F-22s that need a 4th pilot for a time-critical mission. Our backup is incapacitated, and you've just demonstrated knowledge that suggests significant fighter aircraft experience. Jam shook her head, panic rising in her throat. Colonel, you don't understand. I can't what? Can't fly? Because everything you've just told me suggests otherwise. It's complicated, Jam said weakly. Then uncomplicate it, Harrison snapped. Because in 30 minutes, classified NATO intelligence may fall into hostile hands. And you might be the only person on this base who can prevent that from happening. The weight of the moment settled over them like a physical presence. Jam looked around the hangar at the aircraft she had been maintaining, at the 2 military officers who were asking her to step back into a world she had spent 12 years trying to escape. Her hands were no longer trembling. For the first time in years, she felt the familiar calm that had once made her exceptional, settling over her like a second skin. The instincts she had suppressed, the training she had tried to forget, the identity she had buried, all of it was still there, waiting. If I do this, she said quietly, everything changes. Harrison nodded grimly. Everything's already changed, Miss Kowalski. The question is whether you're going to help us change it back. Jam looked through the hangar doors at the F-22s waiting on the tarmac, their engines humming with barely contained power. After 12 years of hiding, of being small and invisible and safe, the aircraft seemed to be calling her home. "I'll need a few minutes to review the mission parameters," she said, her voice stronger than it had been all morning. Harrison's relief was visible. "You'll have them. Muzeller, get her whatever she needs." As the two officers hurried away to coordinate the emergency mission, Jam stood alone in the hangar, staring at her reflection in the polished surface of the C-130. The woman looking back at her was still small, still dark-haired, still wearing mechanic's coveralls. But something fundamental had shifted in her eyes, a recognition of who she really was beneath the carefully constructed facade. For 12 years, she had been Jam Kowalski, the quiet civilian mechanic who blended into the background. In a few minutes, she would have to remember how to be someone else entirely. Someone who had been dead to the world for over a decade, but who had never really gone away. The hardest part wouldn't be flying the F-22. The hardest part would be accepting that her life as an invisible mechanic was over, and that the person she had been hiding was about to be exposed to the world. The flight suit felt familiar against Jam's rich skin as she walked toward the F-22, muscle memory flooding back despite 12 years of suppression. Lieutenant Sarah Chon, the mission leader, watched her approach with professional curiosity. "You must be our emergency backup," Chun said, extending her hand. "I'm Lightning 1 for this mission. You'll be Shadow 4. As they shook hands, Jam unconsciously fell into the confident posture of an experienced pilot. "Thank you for trusting someone you don't know with this," she said. "Colonel Harrison vouched for you," Chun replied, studying Jam's demeanor. "Though I have to ask, when was your last time in an F-22? "It's been a while," Jam said carefully, her eyes automatically scanning the aircraft's configuration. Without thinking, she began cataloging details that only an experienced pilot would notice. Thrust vectoring nozzle positions, stealth coating condition, weapons base status. Chun followed her gaze. "Interesting. You're looking at that aircraft like a pilot, not maintenance crew." Jam caught herself, realizing she had been performing the kind of pre-flight visual inspection that was second nature to fighter pilots. "I work on these systems daily. Hard not to notice things, right?" Chun nodded, though her tone carried skepticism. "What's your assessment of the configuration?" The question should have been a trap for someone with supposedly limited aviation knowledge. Instead, Jam responded instinctively. "Clean stealth configuration. No external stores. Internal weapons bays loaded with AKM-120s for defensive engagement only. Fuel load prioritized for extended range rather than combat payload." Chun stopped walking and stared. "That's classified weapons configuration information. How does a civilian contractor know about internal bay loadouts?" Heat rose in Jam's cheeks as she realized her mistake. "Technical manuals," she said weakly. "Maintenance personnel don't have access to classified weapons data," Chun replied sharply. "Who exactly are you?" Before Jam could answer, they reached the mission briefing room, where Colonel Harrison waited with tactical displays and satellite imagery of the crash site. Major Williams, the third pilot, looked up from his charts. "Shadow 4, Harrison began without preamble. "Raptor 3 went down in grid square 487 to 229. The pilot ejected safely but is injured. The aircraft carries time-sensitive NATO intelligence that cannot be compromised." Jam studied the topographical display with an intensity that surprised everyone present. Her eyes tracked terrain features, elevation changes, and potential approach routes with the precision of someone experienced in tactical mission planning. "Timeline for hostile contact?" she asked, her voice carrying unexpected authority. "Approximately 25 minutes, Harrison replied. "Two groups of unidentified personnel converging on the site. Extraction options for the downed pilot?" Jam continued, her questions becoming increasingly tactical. Williams watched this exchange with growing amazement. Those are mission commander-level questions from someone supposedly pulled from maintenance. Jam realized she was slipping back into old patterns, thinking like the tactical pilot she had once been rather than the civilian she was supposed to be. "I just want to understand the situation completely." "Really?" Chun interjected. "Because you're processing this briefing like someone with extensive combat mission experience." When Harrison displayed radar coverage maps and mentioned electronic warfare considerations, Jam unconsciously nodded and began forming tactical recommendations before catching herself. You were about to say something about electronic countermeasures, Williams prompted. Nothing important, Jam said quickly, but the damage was accumulating. Chun's expression had shifted from professional acceptance to active suspicion. Shadow 4, I need a straight answer. What's your actual flight background? The room fell silent except for the hum of electronic equipment. Jam felt three experienced pilots studying her, trying to reconcile her supposed maintenance background with the obvious tactical expertise she was displaying. It's complicated, she admitted finally. Uncomplicated, Harrison demanded, because you're demonstrating knowledge that civilian contractors don't possess. Sir, Williams added, I've been flying F-22s for 8 years. I've never met maintenance personnel who understand tactical briefings like she does. Jam looked around the room at faces that demanded explanations she wasn't prepared to give. She could continue lying and hope they'd accept inconsistencies or acknowledge that her carefully constructed identity was crumbling under instincts she couldn't suppress. The mission timer chimed, 22 minutes until hostile contact. We'll resolve this later, Harrison said grimly. Right now, we have a mission. But Shadow 4, when we return, you're going to explain exactly who you are and how you know what you clearly know. As they headed toward the aircraft, Chun fell into step beside Jam. Whoever you really are, you better be as good as you seem to think you are. Because if you get us killed because you're hiding something important, I'll personally make sure they court-martial whatever's left of you. Jam nodded, understanding the weight of trust being placed in her despite the growing suspicions. As she approached Raptor 4, 12 years of carefully maintained anonymity felt like it was dissolving with each step toward the cockpit that would force her to remember exactly who she used to be. Captain Marcus Webb had supervised air traffic control at Ramstein for 6 years, guiding thousands of aircraft through German airspace. He prided himself on reading pilots through their radio communications, distinguishing nervous rookies from confident veterans, identifying the subtle markers that separated good pilots from exceptional ones. When Shadow 4 first contacted the tower, something in her voice made Webb pause mid-clearance. Ramstein Tower, Shadow 4 requesting navigation systems verification before departure. The transmission was crisp, professional, carrying an underlying authority that seemed inconsistent with an emergency backup pilot pulled from maintenance duty. Webb keyed his response while signaling his assistant. Shadow 4, cleared for systems check. Rodriguez, pull up the flight roster. I want to know who's flying as Shadow 4. Through the tower windows, Webb observed the 4 F-22s during pre-flight procedures. 3 aircraft showed standard preparation patterns, but Shadow 4 moved with a different precision. No hesitation, no checklist consultation. Movements flowing with practice to efficiency. Sir, Rodriguez called from his terminal. This is odd. Shadow 4 is listed as Jam Kowalski, civilian maintenance contractor. No flight certification on file, no military aviation background documented anywhere. Webb frowned, keying his radio. Shadow 4, confirm flight certification status for tower records. A brief pause preceded the response. Tower, Shadow 4, operating under emergency authorization from Colonel Harrison. The hesitation caught Webb's attention. Legitimate pilots answered certification questions immediately and confidently. This uncertainty suggested something irregular. Lightning 1 confirmed Shadow 4's qualification status. Tower, Shadow 4 cleared for this mission by Squadron Command. Request immediate departure clearance due to time constraints. Webb noted Chun's diplomatic evasion while checking the mission clock. 20 minutes until hostile contact. Whatever irregularities existed would need investigation later. All Raptor flights cleared for immediate departure. Runway 09, winds calm, visibility unlimited. As the F-22s began their takeoff sequence, Webb monitored their communications. What he heard challenged everything he understood about the pilots under his control. Lightning 1, Shadow 4 requesting defensive systems check during climb-out. Shadow 4 approved. Electronic threat assessment, minimal radar signatures detected, no hostile electronic warfare emissions in operational area. Recommend maintaining EMCON Level 2 until reaching search grid. Webb blinked in surprise. EMCON emission control procedures represented advanced tactical knowledge that civilian contractors shouldn't possess. He'd never heard backup pilots discuss electronic warfare with such casual expertise. Rodriguez, start recording all Shadow 4 communications. Full transcript required. The revelations continued as the flight approached the search area. Shadow 4 began providing tactical recommendations that suggested extensive combat experience. Lightning 1 recommend establishing high-low search pattern. 2 aircraft maintain altitude for overwatch, while 2 conduct low-level reconnaissance. High flight provides cover if we encounter hostiles. Chun's response carried evident surprise. Shadow 4, that's excellent tactical planning. How did you, never mind, Lightning Flight, implement Shadow 4's recommendation? Webb was now monitoring every word from the mysterious fourth pilot. In a short time, she demonstrated knowledge of electronic warfare, tactical formation flying, and threat assessment impressive even for experienced squadron pilots. The most revealing moment came when they reached the crash site coordinates. The downed pilot, Captain Rodriguez, was reporting hostile forces approaching. Lightning Flight, downed bird. Visual contact with 12 individuals in military gear approaching from northeast. Estimate 15 minutes to my position. Downed bird Lightning 1. Can you reach more defensible terrain? Negative, Lightning 1, dislocated shoulder. Terrain too rough. Shadow 4's voice cut through with precision that made Webb grab his transcription equipment. Downed bird, Shadow 4. Provide GPS coordinates for a clearing approximately 200 meters southeast of your position. Thermal imaging shows a potential extraction site. Thermal imaging analysis wasn't standard backup pilot knowledge, especially for civilian contractors in emergency situations. Shadow 4 coordinates 48.7234 north, 8.5567 east. How did you identify that clearing? Thermal characteristics consistent with recent ground disturbance, natural windfall area with minimal canopy cover, sufficient space for helicopter extraction. If you can reach it, Rodriguez's amazement was audible. Shadow 4, that's exactly right. I can see the fallen trees. How did you determine that from altitude? Webb looked at Rodriguez, who was staring at the radio equipment. Sir, whoever Shadow 4 is, she's not using standard F-22 sensors for that analysis. Thermal interpretation requires advanced reconnaissance training. Shadow 4 continued demonstrating expertise that defied her supposed background. Lightning 1 recommend establishing a defensive perimeter around the extraction site. Lightning 2 and 3 conduct low passes to deter hostile approach. I'll maintain overwatch and coordinate with rescue helicopters. Shadow 4, Chun responded with audible confusion. That's perfect tactical coordination. Where exactly did you learn rescue operations? The pause was longer than necessary. When Shadow 4 responded, her voice carried a different quality, more guarded, more careful. Just thinking through the problem logically. Webb knew he was witnessing something extraordinary. 6 years of air traffic control had never produced a pilot demonstrating such sophisticated knowledge while maintaining calm professionalism that suggested extensive combat experience. He reached for the secure line to Colonel Harrison's office. Whatever was happening with Shadow 4 transcended simple emergency substitution. Webb had the distinct impression he was listening to someone hiding expertise that fundamentally changed everything about this mission. As rescue operations unfolded, Webb documented every tactical suggestion, technical observation, and moment of battlefield awareness Shadow 4 displayed. By the mission's end, he'd have evidence proving the woman flying in a Shadow 4 was far more than she appeared. The question remaining, who was she really? And why was someone with elite combat pilot skills hiding as a maintenance contractor? The mission had ended successfully. Captain Rodriguez was extracted safely. The hostile forces were deterred, and the classified intelligence remained secure. But as the 4 F-22s touched down at Ramstein, Colonel Harrison knew the real interrogation was just beginning. In the post-flight debriefing room, Jam sat across from Harrison, Chun, and Williams, still wearing her borrowed flight suit. The adrenaline from the mission was fading, replaced by the cold reality that her 12 years of hiding were about to end. Shadow 4, Harrison began formally, your performance today was exceptional, tactically sound, professionally executed, and demonstrated expertise that frankly defies explanation given your supposed background. Jam remained silent, hands folded in her lap, trying to project calm while her mind raced through possible explanations that wouldn't expose everything. The problem, Chun interjected, is that civilian maintenance contractors don't know how to interpret thermal imaging from F-22 sensors. They don't coordinate rescue operations or recommend tactical formations. Williams leaned forward. Ma'am, I've been flying combat missions for 12 years. What you did up there, the situational awareness, the tactical thinking, the absolute calm under pressure, that's not something you learn from technical manuals. Harrison opened a folder containing transcripts from Captain Webb's communications log. According to air traffic control, you demonstrated knowledge of EMCON procedures, electronic warfare assessment, and reconnaissance interpretation that would be impressive for a squadron commander. I was just trying to help solve the problem, Jam said quietly. By using skills that take years of specialized training to develop, Harrison challenged. Shadow 4, we're going to run a complete background investigation, full security clearance review, biometric analysis, the works. If you're hiding something, we will find it. That's when Major Williams noticed something that changed everything. As Jam reached up to remove her helmet, her sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing the edge of what appeared to be a tattoo on her inner wrist. Wait, Williams said sharply. What's that marking on your wrist? Jam's hand instinctively moved to cover the spot, but it was too late. Williams had seen enough to recognize military ink. Show us, Harrison commanded. With trembling hands, Jam rolled back her sleeve, revealing a small but distinctive tattoo, wings wrapped around a lightning bolt with numbers beneath. TG-0713. The room fell completely silent. Chun's eyes widened in recognition, while Williams leaned closer to examine the marking. That's not just any military tattoo, Chun whispered. Those are naval aviator wings. Harrison's expression shifted from suspicion to something approaching shock. TG-0713, Top Gun class of 2013, the 13th graduate of the 2007 program. That's impossible, Williams said. Top Gun graduates are tracked throughout their careers. There's no way someone with that level of training just disappears into civilian maintenance work. Jam closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 12 years of secrets pressing down on her. The tattoo had been her one moment of pride, commemorating her graduation from the Navy's elite fighter weapons school. She had never been able to bring herself to have it removed, even when every logical part of her brain said she should. Ma'am, Harrison said, his voice carrying a different tone now, respect mixed with confusion. If you graduated from Top Gun in 2013, you were 19 years old, the youngest graduate in the program's history. Chun was already pulling up databases on her tablet, running a search for Top Gun Class 2013. Here it is. She paused, reading graduate number 13, Lieutenant Jamila Kowalski, call sign Phoenix, graduated top of class with highest scores in tactical awareness and air-to-air combat. Jamila, Williams said quietly, that's your real name. Harrison leaned back in his chair, processing this revelation. According to this record, Lieutenant Kowalski was assigned to VFA 151 Vigilantes after Top Gun graduation. But there's a gap in the service record starting in 2014. What happened in 2014? Chun asked directly. Jam opened her eyes, meeting their gazes for the first time since the tattoo was discovered. Training accident, she said quietly. My wingman died because of my mistake. I couldn't fly after that. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Here was someone who had achieved the highest level of naval aviation training, only to have her career destroyed by tragedy. You left the Navy? Harrison asked gently. I resigned my commission, Jam confirmed. Changed my name back to my maiden name, moved to Europe, tried to disappear from everything that reminded me of flying. William studied the database entry. According to this, Lieutenant Jamila Kowalski was recommended for the Silver Star for actions during a training exercise that saved multiple aircraft. That doesn't sound like someone who made a fatal mistake. The recommendation was filed after I'd already left, Jam said bitterly. Too little, too late. Chun looked up from her research with an expression of amazement. Jam, do you realize what this means? You're not just any pilot. You're Phoenix, the youngest Top Gun graduate ever. The pilot who set tactical awareness records that still haven't been broken. I'm a washout who got someone killed, Jam replied. You're a legend, Harrison corrected. Phoenix was supposed to be the future of naval aviation. There were rumors that you'd been selected for experimental aircraft programs, classified missions that most pilots only dream about. Jam shook her head. That person doesn't exist anymore. She died in that cockpit 12 years ago, along with my wingman. The weight of her revelation hung in the air. They had discovered not just a hidden pilot, but a legendary one whose disappearance had apparently left ripples throughout the naval aviation community. Harrison closed the folder, his expression mixing professional assessment with human compassion. Phoenix, we need to make some calls. There are people who've been looking for you for over a decade. Please don't, Jam whispered. I just want to go back to being invisible. That's not possible anymore, Chun said gently. Not after today. You just proved that Phoenix never really died. She's been hiding in plain sight, and she's still the exceptional pilot she always was. Within hours of discovering Jam's true identity, Colonel Harrison's office had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Secure video conferences connected Ramstein with the Pentagon, Naval Air Station Fallon, and NATO headquarters in Brussels. The woman who had spent 12 years hiding as a maintenance contractor was about to face the military establishment she had fled from. Admiral Rebecca Stone appeared on the main screen from Naval Air Station Fallon. Her weathered face showed a mixture of disbelief and something that might have been relief. At 55, Stone had been the commanding officer of Top Gun when Jam graduated in 2013. Colonel Harrison, Stone began without preamble, please confirm that you have Lieutenant Jamila Kowalski in custody. Not in custody, Admiral, Harrison corrected. Miss Kowalski is here voluntarily, though I suspect she'd prefer to be anywhere else right now. Jam sat rigidly in her chair, still wearing the flight suit that had exposed her identity. Facing Admiral Stone through a video screen felt surreal after 12 years of believing she'd never see her former commanding officer again. Phoenix, Stone said, using Jam's old call sign, do you have any idea how many people have been looking for you? Admiral, I'm not Phoenix anymore, Jam replied quietly. I haven't been for 12 years. Stone's expression softened slightly. Jamila, you disappeared without explanation. One day you were the most promising pilot in naval aviation. The next, you'd resigned your commission and vanished. We've had investigators trying to track you down for over a decade. On another screen, Captain David Martinez from the Pentagon joined the conference. Jam recognized him immediately. He'd been her flight instructor during advanced tactical training. Phoenix, Martinez said, his voice carrying both frustration and concern. We need to talk about Lieutenant Commander Sarah Walsh. The name hit Jam like a physical blow. Sarah Walsh had been her wingman, her best friend, and the pilot who died in the training accident that ended Jam's career. Sarah's dead because of me, Jam said flatly. There's nothing to discuss. Actually, there is, Martinez replied, pulling up classified files. The accident investigation was completed 6 months after you resigned. The findings were classified, but you need to know what really happened that day. Admiral Stone leaned forward. Jamila, the accident wasn't your fault. The investigation proved that Lieutenant Commander Walsh's aircraft suffered a catastrophic hydraulic failure that had nothing to do with your flying or tactical decisions. Jam shook her head violently. That's impossible. I was flight leader. I made the call to push the envelope during the training exercise. If I hadn't been so aggressive, you would have lost 3 aircraft instead of 1, Martinez interrupted. Phoenix, your tactical decision to break formation and engage the simulated threat prevented a mid-air collision that would have killed 6 pilots instead of 1. The words seemed to hang in the air without meaning. Jam had spent 12 years believing she was responsible for her wingman's death, building an entire identity around guilt and self-imposed exile. The hydraulic failure was a manufacturing defect, Stone continued, a flaw in the flight control system that had gone undetected for months. Sarah's aircraft was going to fail, regardless of what mission profile you chose that day. Colonel Harrison watched Jam's reaction carefully. Miss Kowalski, are you telling us that you've been hiding for 12 years based on guilt over an accident that wasn't your fault? I killed my best friend, Jam whispered. No, came a new voice from the speakers. Captain Rodriguez, the pilot they had rescued that morning, had joined the conference from the base medical facility. You saved lives today, just like you apparently saved lives 12 years ago. Rodriguez's image appeared on screen, his arm in a sling, but his expression determined. Ma'am, I don't know the details of what happened in 2014, but I know what happened today. You coordinated a perfect rescue operation under hostile conditions. That's not the performance of someone who makes fatal mistakes. Admiral Stone opened another file. Phoenix, there's something else you need to know. The Silver Star recommendation that was filed after your resignation, it was approved. You've been awarded the Silver Star for heroism during the training exercise where Sarah died. Martinez continued. The citation reads, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action while serving as flight leader during a multi-aircraft training emergency, Lieutenant Kowalski's tactical decision-making and exceptional flying skills prevented multiple aircraft losses and saved the lives of 5 fellow aviators. Jam stared at the screens in disbelief. You're saying I received a medal for the day my wingman died? You received a medal for the day you saved 5 other pilots from dying along with fear, Stone corrected. Jamila, the tactical analysis of that day has been used in training scenarios for 12 years. Your decision-making under pressure is literally being taught to the next generation of naval aviators. The revelation was too much to process. 12 years of guilt, 12 years of self-imposed exile, 12 years of believing she was a failure, all based on incomplete information and survivor's guilt. Phoenix, Stone said gently, we've never stopped looking for you because the Navy needs pilots like you. The kind of pilot who can coordinate a perfect rescue mission while flying an aircraft she supposedly hasn't touched in over a decade. Chun, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke. Admiral, today's mission performance suggests that Lieutenant Kowalski's skills haven't deteriorated despite 12 years away from fighter aircraft. Her tactical awareness and flight instincts were exceptional. That doesn't surprise me, Stone replied. Phoenix was always exceptional. The question is whether she's ready to stop running from who she is. Jam looked around the room at faces both familiar and new, all watching her with expressions that mixed professional assessment with human compassion. For 12 years, she had believed she was hiding from justice. Instead, she had been hiding from vindication. What happens now? She asked quietly. Now, Admiral Stone said, we give you a choice. You can return to your maintenance job, and we'll respect your decision to remain civilian, or you can consider that maybe it's time for Phoenix to come home. The weight of 12 years of hiding pressed against the possibility of redemption. For the first time since 2014, Jam began to consider that maybe she had been wrong about everything. The secure conference room at Ramstein had become a crossroads between Jam's hidden past and an uncertain future. Admiral Stone's offer hung in the air like a challenge she wasn't sure she was ready to accept. Admiral, Jam said slowly, you don't understand what the last 12 years have been like. I've spent every day believing I killed my best friend. I've built an entire life around the certainty that I was a failure. Captain Martinez leaned forward on the screen. Phoenix, we have the complete accident investigation files. Would you like to see exactly what happened that day? Against every instinct telling her to refuse, Jam nodded. Martinez began displaying classified documents that she had never seen, technical analyses, flight data recordings, and witness statements from the training exercise that had destroyed her world. The exercise was a complex multi-threat scenario, Martinez explained. 6 F-18s engaging simulated enemy aircraft while protecting a high-value target. You were flight leader, Sarah was your wingman. Jam closed her eyes, remembering. I called for an aggressive intercept when the opposing force tried to flank our formation. Sarah followed my lead. According to flight data, that decision was tactically perfect, Martinez continued. The opposing force was attempting a coordinated attack that would have overwhelmed your defensive positions. Your intercept call prevented them from achieving firing solutions on 4 different aircraft. Admiral Stone took over the narrative. The hydraulic failure occurred several minutes after your intercept maneuver. Sarah's aircraft lost primary flight controls while in a high G-turn. The failure was instantaneous and unrecoverable. But if I hadn't called for the aggressive maneuver, Jam began. The failure would have happened anyway, Stone interrupted. The manufacturing defect created a stress fracture in the hydraulic line that was already 7% complete before the exercise even began. Any significant maneuvering would have triggered the failure. Colonel Harrison, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Miss Kowalski, what they're telling you is that your wingman was flying a ticking time bomb. Your tactical decisions didn't cause the accident. They delayed it long enough for you to save 5 other pilots. Martinez displayed another document. Phoenix, after Sarah's aircraft failed, you coordinated a textbook emergency response. You guided the remaining aircraft clear the debris field, established a safe recovery pattern, and personally escorted a damaged F-18 back to base when its pilot became disoriented. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the pilot you escorted, went on to become one of our most decorated aviators, Stone added. He credits your leadership that day with saving his life and career. The information was overwhelming. 12 years of guilt and self-recrimination were crumbling under the weight of facts she had never known existed. Why wasn't I told this at the time? Jam asked. Because you disappeared before the investigation concluded, Stone replied. We tried to contact you, but you'd already resigned your commission and vanished. By the time we had answers, Phoenix had become a ghost. Chun, who had been reviewing the technical data, looked up with amazement. Jam, these flight recordings show decision-making under pressure that's being used to train current Top Gun students. You're literally a case study in tactical excellence. There's more, Martinez said, opening another file. After your disappearance, we analyzed your entire flight training record. Your tactical innovation scores were off the charts. You weren't just an exceptional pilot. You were developing new combat techniques that we're still implementing today. Admiral Stone's expression grew serious. Phoenix, the reason we've been looking for you isn't just because of what you accomplished in the past. It's because of what you could accomplish in the future. The Navy is developing next-generation fighter programs that need pilots with your specific combination of tactical innovation and flight instincts. I'm 25 years old, Jam said quietly. I've been out of fighters for 12 years. I'm not the pilot I was. Today suggests otherwise, Colonel Harrison interjected. You just executed a perfect combat rescue mission in an aircraft you supposedly hadn't flown in over a decade. Your tactical awareness was exceptional. Captain Rodriguez, still connected from the medical facility, spoke up. Ma'am, with respect, you saved my life today using skills that most pilots spend decades trying to develop. If that's what you're capable of after 12 years away from fighters, I can't imagine what you could do with proper training and support. Admiral Stone leaned forward. Jamila, I'm going to be direct. The Navy needs Phoenix back, not just because of who you were, but because of who you could become. We're developing classified programs that require pilots with your unique combination of tactical innovation and proven performance under extreme stress. What kind of programs? Jam asked, despite herself. The kind that could change the future of air combat, Martinez replied. Advanced stealth platforms, experimental aircraft, missions that push the boundaries of what's possible. The kind of flying that made you want to be a pilot in the first place. For the first time in 12 years, Jam felt a spark of the excitement that had once driven her to pursue naval aviation. The possibility of flying again, really flying, not just maintaining aircraft, was both terrifying and exhilarating. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course, Stone replied. But Phoenix, don't it take too long. The world needs pilots like you, and you've already spent 12 years hiding from who you're meant to be. As the video conference had ended and the screens went dark, Jam sat alone with Colonel Harrison in the quiet conference room. The weight of revelation was settling over her like a physical presence. Colonel Shinba, she said quietly, what if I'm not ready? What if 12 years of hiding has broken something essential? Harrison smiled. Phoenix, you just proved that nothing essential is broken. The question is whether you're ready to stop being afraid of your own excellence. For the first time in 12 years, Jam began to consider that maybe fear, not guilt, had been keeping her grounded. The next morning brought a knock on Jam's apartment door that she had been expecting, but dreading. Colonel Harrison stood outside with Major Williams and a woman in civilian clothes carrying an official-looking briefcase. Miss Kowalski, Harrison said formally to me, this is Agent Sarah Kim from the Defense Security Service. We need to conduct a formal background review. Jam invited them in, her small apartment feeling cramped with 3 military officials examining her carefully constructed civilian life. Agent Kim immediately began photographing documents, personal items, and anything that might provide insight into how a Top Gun graduate had managed to disappear for 12 years. Impressive operational security, Kim commented, examining Jam's falsified documentation, multiple name changes, carefully constructed employment history, and financial records that supported her cover identity. This wasn't amateur hour. You knew how to disappear professionally. I was motivated, Jam replied dryly. The question is, by what? Williams interjected. Phoenix, we've been reviewing your complete service record. There's something that doesn't add up about your resignation timeline. Kim opened her briefcase and spread out a series of official documents. According to Navy personnel records, you submitted your resignation shortly after the accident. That's only a few days between the accident and your resignation. That's not enough time to process grief and make a rational career decision, Harrison observed. What happened in that week that made you so certain you needed to leave? Jam felt uncomfortable under their scrutiny. I knew I was responsible for Sarah's death. I couldn't stay in the Navy knowing what I'd done. But you couldn't have known you were responsible, Kim pressed, because the accident investigation hadn't even begun. So what made you so certain of your guilt? The question forced Jam to confront memories she had been avoiding for 12 years. The other pilots, she said quietly. The way they looked at me after the accident, the whispers in the ready room, everyone knew I'd pushed too hard during the exercise. Williams exchanged a look with Harrison. Phoenix, can you be more specific about these reactions? Who exactly was whispering? Lieutenant Commander Blake Morrison was the most vocal, Jam recalled painfully. He said I was reckless, that Sarah died because I was trying to show off my Top Gun training. Kim was taking notes rapidly. Morrison, we'll need to review his statements from that period. She looked up at Jam. What else do you remember about the aftermath? Captain Stevens, he was the squadron commander. He barely spoke to me after the accident. When I submitted my resignation, he approved it immediately. No counseling, no attempt to keep me in the Navy. It felt like everyone wanted me gone. Harrison's expression darkened. Phoenix, Captain Stevens died in a car accident, but Morrison is still active duty, currently stationed at Naval Air Station Oceana. We're going to need to interview him, Kim said, because something about this timeline doesn't make sense. Agent Kim connected her laptop to a secure network and began pulling up classified files that made everyone in the room lean forward. Here's Morrison's statement from the accident investigation. She read, he claims that Lieutenant Kowalski was consistently aggressive and insubordinate during training exercises, and that her reckless leadership directly contributed to the accident. But look at this, Williams said, reading over Kim's shoulder. Morrison's fitness reports showed declining performance ratings starting 6 months before the accident. He was being considered for removal from flight status. Kim scrolled through more documents. Morrison filed a formal complaint against you 3 weeks before the accident, Phoenix. He alleged that you were receiving preferential treatment because of your Top Gun credentials. The pieces of a 12-year-old puzzle were starting to come together. Jam had been so consumed by grief and guilt that she had never questioned the hostile environment that had driven her to resign. There's more, Kim continued. Morrison was Sarah Walsh's previous wingman before she was reassigned to fly with you. His complaint specifically mentioned that he believed that he should have remained as flight leader instead of being replaced by an inexperienced Top Gun graduate. Harrison leaned back in his chair. So Morrison had professional jealousy, declining performance, and was facing potential removal from flight status. Then a tragic accident gave him the opportunity to blame someone else for the squadron's problems. That's speculation, Jam said, though doubt was creeping into her voice. Is it? Kim asked, pulling up another document. Because here's Captain Stevens' private correspondence with his superiors. He writes, the Morrison situation has created a toxic environment in the squadron. His targeting of Lieutenant Kowalski appears to be motivated by jealousy rather than legitimate safety concerns. Williams shook his head in disgust. Phoenix, you were set up. Morrison used Sarah's death as an opportunity to destroy your career and cover his own failures. But Stevens approved my resignation immediately, Jam protested. Look at the date on his correspondence, Kim said. Stevens wrote this letter recommending Morrison's removal from the flight status one day after you resigned. He was planning to address the toxic environment, but you were already gone. The revelation hit Jam like a physical blow. She had fled the Navy not because of her own failures, but because she had been systematically undermined by a jealous pilot who had seen her success as a threat to his career. Morrison was relieved of flight duty 6 months after you left, Harrison added, officially for performance deficiencies, but the timing suggests Stevens finally addressed the problems you never stayed to see resolved. Agent Kim closed her laptop. Phoenix, you spent 12 years believing you were guilty of something that wasn't your fault, driven away by someone who was jealous of your abilities. The question now is what you're going to do with this information. Jam stared at the documents scattered across her coffee table, evidence that her entire understanding of the past 12 years had been built on lies and manipulation. Morrison destroyed my career based on jealousy, she said quietly. He let me believe I was responsible for Sarah's death when he knew the investigation would prove otherwise. That's exactly what happened, Williams confirmed. And while you've been hiding as a maintenance contractor, he's been promoted to commander and is currently serving as an instructor at the Navy's test pilot school. The injustice was overwhelming. While Jam had spent 12 years in self-imposed exile, the man who had driven her away had advanced his career by standing on the wreckage of hers. What do I do now? She asked. Harrison stood up, his expression determined. Now, Phoenix, you stop letting Blake Morrison define who you are. You take back the career he stole from you. For the first time in 12 years, anger was replacing guilt in Jam's heart. And with that anger came a determination she hadn't felt since she was 19 years old and conquering the skies above Nevada. Days after the investigation revealed Blake Morrison's betrayal, Jam sat in the base chapel at Ramstein, a place she hadn't visited since arriving in Germany. The quiet space felt appropriate for confronting the deepest truths about why she had really been hiding for 12 years. Agent Kim had requested one final interview, this time focusing on the psychological factors that had driven Jam's decision to disappear. Colonel Harrison and Major Williams were present, but their roles had shifted from interrogators to supporters. Phoenix, Kim began gently, we've established that Morrison manipulated the situation after Sarah's death, but I need to understand why his manipulation was so effective. What made you so ready to believe you were guilty? The question cut to the heart of everything Jam had been avoiding. Sarah was my best friend, she said quietly. We'd been through flight school together, deployed together. She trusted me completely. That's not an answer, Kim pressed. Wingmen trust their flight leaders. That's how the system works. Why did Sarah's trust make you feel responsible for an equipment failure? Jam stared at the chapel's stained glass windows, memories flooding back. Because I knew I was different from other pilots. I'd always been faster to learn, quicker to adapt. I graduated Top Gun at 19 because I could see patterns and solutions that other pilots missed. Williams leaned forward. That sounds like a gift, not a liability. It was a burden, Jam replied. Do you know what it's like to be exceptional at something when people are constantly telling you that you're too young, too inexperienced, too aggressive? I spent my entire naval career trying to prove I deserved to be there. Kim nodded, understanding beginning to show in her expression. So, when the accident happened, Morrison's accusations confirmed fears you already had about yourself. Exactly. He said I was reckless, that I was showing off my Top Gun training. Part of me believed him because I'd always worried that my confidence was actually arrogance. Harrison spoke up. Phoenix, that's called imposter syndrome. It's common among high achievers, especially young ones. But imposter syndrome doesn't usually lead to 12 years of self-imposed exile, Kim observed. There's something else. What happened after Sarah's funeral? Jam closed her eyes, remembering the day that had sealed her decision to leave the Navy. Sarah's parents were there. Her mother came up to me and asked if I was the flight leader who'd been responsible for their daughter's safety. The room fell silent as the weight of that moment settled over them. I told her yes, Jam continued. She looked at me, this 19-year-old girl, and asked how someone so young could be trusted with her daughter's life. She didn't say it cruelly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. That's when you decided to resign, Kim said softly. That's when I realized everyone was right to question whether I belonged there. Sarah's mother trusted the Navy to keep her daughter safe, and the Navy had put a teenager in charge. When Sarah died, it felt like proof that the system had failed by believing in me. William shook his head. Phoenix, Sarah's mother, was grieving. People say things when they're in pain that they don't really mean. Maybe, Jam said, but Morrison was there too. He heard the conversation and told me later that Sarah's parents deserved to know the truth about my reckless leadership. He offered to testify at any investigation about my pattern of aggressive behavior. Kim was taking notes rapidly. Morrison used a grieving mother's pain to reinforce his psychological manipulation. That's sophisticated emotional abuse. I didn't see it that way at the time, Jam admitted. I saw it as confirmation that I'd been fooling myself about my abilities. If I couldn't keep my best friend safe, how could I be trusted with anyone else's life? Harrison leaned back in his chair. So you convinced yourself that leaving was protecting other pilots from your supposed failures? I thought I was being responsible, Jam said. I thought admitting I wasn't good enough was more honest than continuing to pretend I belonged in that cockpit. Kim closed her notebook. Phoenix, what you've described is a textbook case of a gifted individual being systematically undermined by someone who felt threatened by their abilities. Morrison didn't just destroy your career. He convinced you to destroy it yourself. The tragedy, Williams added, is that while you've been hiding your talents, pilots have been dying in situations where your skills could have made the difference. Jam looked up sharply. What do you mean? Over the past 12 years, there have been multiple combat situations where tactical innovation like yours could have prevented casualties, Harrison explained. Search and rescue missions that failed because no one could think outside standard protocols. Training accidents that might have been avoided with better flight leadership. The implication was staggering. Jam had thought she was protecting people by staying away from aviation. Instead, her absence might have cost lives. How many? She asked quietly. We can't quantify it exactly, Kim replied. But the Navy's tactical innovation has stagnated since you left. Your former instructors have told us repeatedly that pilots like Phoenix come along once in a generation. Admiral Stone wasn't exaggerating when she said the Navy needs you back. Williams added, the current generation of pilots is technically proficient but lacks the kind of creative thinking you demonstrated naturally. Jam felt the weight of 12 years of self-imposed exile settling on her shoulders differently now. She had thought she was saving lives by staying away. Instead, she might have been condemning people through her absence. Morrison didn't just steal my career, she realized. He stole 12 years of service that could have made a difference. That's exactly right, Harrison confirmed, which is why the question isn't whether you should return to flying. It's whether you can afford not to. For the first time since Sarah's death, Jam began to consider that her guilt had been not just misplaced, but selfish. She had been so focused on her own pain that she had never considered the larger cost of removing her talents from the world. What happens if I say yes, she asked. Kim smiled for the first time since the interview began. Then Phoenix finally comes home. That evening, Jam walked through the small German town near Ramstein Air Base, trying to process everything she had learned about her past and the decision that lay ahead. The quiet streets felt symbolic of the anonymous life she had built, safe, predictable, and ultimately unfulfilling. She stopped at a cafe where she had been a regular customer for 4 years. The owner, Hans Muller, greeted her with his usual friendly smile. Guten Abend, Jam. The usual coffee? For 4 years, Hans had known her as the quiet aircraft mechanic who kept to herself but always tipped well. She had attended his daughter's wedding, helped repair his delivery truck, and become part of the fabric of this small community. The thought of leaving felt like another betrayal, this time of people who had accepted her without question. Hans, she said carefully, what would you do if you discovered if you discovered you'd been living a lie for years? The older man studied her face with the wisdom of someone who had lived through enough history to recognize when someone was wrestling with fundamental truths. I suppose, he said slowly, it would depend on whether the lie was protecting others or just protecting myself. The simple observation cut to the heart of Jam's dilemma. Her 12 years of hiding had been presented as protecting others from her supposed failures. But the investigation had revealed that her absence had potentially cost lives, making her exile an act of self-protection disguised as sacrifice. Walking back to her apartment, Jam called the one person who might understand the complexity of her situation. Emma Kowalski, her adopted sister, who had been raised by their grandmother in Poland after their parents died. Jamila, Emma's voice carried surprise and concern. You never call. Is everything all right? For the next hour, Jam found herself explaining 12 years of hidden truth to the only family she had left. Emma listened without judgment as Jam described her naval career, Sarah's death, Morrison's manipulation, and the offer to return to service. So, you've been living as a maintenance worker when you're actually some kind of aviation prodigy, Emma summarized. I was, Jam corrected, 12 years ago. Bullshit, Emma said with characteristic bluntness. People don't lose that kind of talent. They just convince themselves it's gone because it's safer than risking failure. The observation stung because it was accurate. Emma, I got someone killed. No, according to what you just told me, someone else got your friend killed and then convinced you it was your fault. There's a difference. Emma's voice softened. Jamila, do you remember when Papa used to tell us that gifts come with responsibilities? Jam remembered. Their father had been a mathematics professor who had often spoken about the obligation that came with exceptional abilities. He used to say that hiding your gifts because you're afraid of failure isn't humility, it's selfishness, Emma continued, because somewhere someone needs what you can provide. What if I'm not as good as I used to be? Then you practice until you are. But Jamila, from what you've described, you just successfully flew a combat mission after 12 years away from fighters. How much better do you need to be? After ending the call, Jam sat in her small apartment, looking at the life she had built. 4 years of rent receipts, maintenance manuals, technical certifications, all evidence of competence deliberately constrained. The apartment felt like a prison she had constructed to contain talents that made her afraid of her own potential. She opened her laptop and began researching what she had missed during her 12 years away from naval aviation. New aircraft systems, evolved tactics, technological advances that had transformed air combat. The learning curve would be steep, but not insurmountable. More importantly, she researched the classified programs Admiral Stone had mentioned. Next-generation stealth platforms, experimental aircraft, missions that push the boundaries of possibility. The kind of flying that had originally drawn her to naval aviation, not just piloting aircraft, but advancing the very concept of what aircraft could accomplish. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Colonel Harrison. Phoenix, take all the time you need to decide, but remember, the world needs pilots who can see solutions others miss. It's needed them for 12 years. Jam stared at the message, thinking about all the missions she hadn't flown, all the innovations she hadn't contributed, all the pilots she hadn't trained. The personal cost of returning to service would be enormous, leaving the safe anonymity she had built, facing the pressure of living up to her reputation, risking failure on a public stage. But the cost of continuing to hide was becoming equally clear. Every day she spent maintaining aircraft instead of flying them was a day her talents weren't serving their intended purpose. Every training exercise she missed was knowledge that wasn't passed to the next generation. Every mission she didn't fly was a problem that might go unsolved. She walked to her bedroom closet and pulled out a box she hadn't opened in 4 years. Inside were her Naval Academy ring, her Top Gun graduation certificate, and a photograph of her and Sarah Walsh standing next to an F-18 after a training flight. Looking at Sarah's smile in the photograph, Jam realized something that 12 years of guilt had obscured. Sarah had died doing what she loved, flying with someone she trusted, in service to something larger than herself. Honoring Sarah's memory didn't require self-exile. It required continuing the work they had started together. For the first time since 2014, Jam began to consider that maybe the greatest tragedy wasn't Sarah's death or Morrison's betrayal. Maybe the greatest tragedy was letting those events prevent Phoenix from becoming who she was meant to be. Jam picked up her phone and typed a message to Admiral Stone. Ma'am, Phoenix is ready to come home. She hit send before she could change her mind, officially ending 12 years of hiding and beginning whatever came next. Admiral Stone's response came quickly. Phoenix, I've been waiting 12 years for that message. Expect visitors tomorrow morning. Welcome back to the Navy. The next morning brought a convoy of official vehicles to Jam's apartment building, drawing curious stares from neighbors who had known her only as the quiet aircraft mechanic. Admiral Stone emerged from the lead vehicle, followed by Captain Martinez and 3 officers Jam didn't recognize. Lieutenant Commander Kowalski, Stone said formally, using the rank Jam would have held if she had never left the Navy. These gentlemen have been looking forward to meeting the legendary Phoenix. The first officer stepped forward with an expression of genuine awe. "Ma'am, I'm Commander Jake Sullivan, current Top Gun instructor. I've been teaching your tactical innovations for 8 years without knowing if you were still alive." The second officer, a woman with captain's insignia, extended her hand. "Captain Lisa Chun, Naval Test Pilot School. Your flight data from 2013 is still being analyzed for advanced maneuvering techniques." The third officer, a young lieutenant with pilot wings, looked nervous. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Alex Rodriguez, Captain Rodriguez's son. My father told me you saved his life during training, and that experience inspired him to become an instructor. He's been telling pilots about Phoenix for as long as I can remember." Jam felt overwhelmed by the realization that her naval career had continued to influence people long after she had left. "I had no idea anyone remembered." "Remembered?" Sullivan laughed. "Ma'am, you're practically mythology in naval aviation circles. The pilot who graduated Top Gun at 19, developed tactical innovations that changed air combat doctrine, then vanished without explanation. Every flight instructor has theories about what happened to Phoenix." Captain Chun opened a briefcase filled with technical documents. "Phoenix, we need to show you what your innovations have become. The tactical maneuvers you developed in 2013 evolved into the foundation for multi-platform combat coordination." She spread out diagrams showing complex formation flying techniques that bore clear resemblance to Jam's original concepts, but refined through years of development and real-world application. "These formations have been used in actual combat operations," Chun continued. "Pilots using your techniques have successfully completed missions that would have been impossible with conventional tactics. You've saved lives you never knew about." Admiral Stone pulled out another folder. "Phoenix, there's something else you need to know. After you disappeared, we established the Phoenix Initiative, a program dedicated to identifying and developing pilots with your combination of tactical innovation and flight instincts. The initiative has identified 12 pilots over the past decade who show similar potential," Martinez added. "But none of them had someone like you to learn from. They've been developing in isolation, trying to recreate innovations you pioneered naturally." Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up. "Ma'am, those pilots have been asking to meet you since we confirmed you were alive. They consider you the template for what exceptional naval aviation can achieve." The weight of this revelation was staggering. Jam had thought her disappearance had ended her influence on naval aviation. Instead, her work had continued to grow and evolve, inspiring an entire generation of pilots who had been searching for the mentor they had never had. "There's more," Stone said, opening a secure tablet. "We've been developing next-generation fighter platforms specifically designed around the tactical concepts you pioneered. The aircraft exist, but we've been waiting for the right pilot to test them." The tablet displayed technical specifications for aircraft that looked like science fiction, stealth fighters with capabilities that push the boundaries of current technology. "These platforms require pilots who can think beyond conventional limitations," Chun explained. "Pilots who can develop new tactics in real time, who can see solutions that others miss. Pilots like Phoenix." Sullivan leaned forward. "Ma'am, the entire naval aviation community has been waiting 12 years for you to come back and teach us what we've been missing." "The Phoenix Initiative pilots want to learn directly from you," Martinez added. "Not just your techniques, but your approach to tactical thinking. How to see patterns others miss. How to innovate under pressure." Admiral Stone closed the tablet. "Phoenix, you thought you were hiding to protect others from your failures. But the truth is, your absence has been the greatest loss naval aviation has suffered in decades. We need you to come to Fallon, not just to fly again, but to lead the next evolution of air combat training, to mentor the pilots who've been trying to follow in your footsteps." Jam looked around at the faces watching her. Officers who represented years of development built on foundations she had laid as a teenager. The realization that her work had continued to matter, that pilots had been carrying forward innovations she had thought were forgotten, was both humbling and inspiring. "When do we leave?" she asked. Stone smiled. "Phoenix, we've been ready since 2014. The question is whether you're prepared for what comes next." As the officers began discussing logistics for her return to Fallon, Jam realized that coming home wasn't just about reclaiming her identity as Phoenix. It was about accepting responsibility for the influence she had never stopped having. The flight from Germany to Naval Air Station Fallon felt like traveling backward through time. As the C-130 transport descended toward the Nevada desert, Jam could see the familiar landmarks that had defined her transformation, from promising pilot to Top Gun legend, a transformation she had abandoned at its peak. Waiting on the tarmac was a reception committee that reinforced how much her absence had been felt. Admiral Stone stood with a formation of pilots representing the Phoenix Initiative, 12 aviators who had been identified as having the potential to match her innovative capabilities. As Jam descended the aircraft stairs, she was struck by how young they looked. Most appeared to be in their mid-20s, the same age she had been when she had convinced herself she was too inexperienced to deserve her position. "Phoenix," Admiral Stone announced to the assembled group, "meet the pilots who've been waiting to learn from you." The first pilot stepped forward, a confident woman with Lieutenant Commander insignia. "Ma'am, I'm Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim. I've studied every recording of your training flights. Your approach to multi-threat engagements changed how I think about air combat." One by one, the pilots introduced themselves, each sharing how Jam's documented innovations had influenced their development. The reverence in their voices was both gratifying and terrifying. They were looking to her as a mentor, but she felt like a fraud who had spent 12 years running from the responsibilities they represented. "Ma'am," asked Lieutenant Tony Vasquez, one of the younger pilots, "is it true that you developed the Phoenix maneuver in response to an impossible training scenario?" Jam recognized the question. It referred to a complex tactical solution she had improvised during a Top Gun exercise that had since become standard doctrine for escaping multi-threat environments. "I was just trying not to get shot down," she replied, deflecting the implied heroism. "But that's exactly the point," Lieutenant Commander Kim interjected. "You found solutions that no one else could see because you weren't limited by conventional thinking." Admiral Stone guided the group toward a briefing room where Jam's complete training records had been displayed. Flight data, tactical analyses, and innovation assessments that painted a picture of exceptional capabilities she had never fully appreciated. "Phoenix," Stone said, "I want you to look at these records objectively, not as the pilot who made them, but as an instructor evaluating someone else's potential." The data was overwhelming. Flight performance metrics that consistently exceeded standards, tactical innovations that had been adopted throughout naval aviation, leadership assessments that described capabilities far beyond her years and experience. "If you were evaluating this pilot for advanced training," Stone continued, "what would your recommendation be?" Jam studied the records, trying to see them through a professional rather than personal perspective. "This pilot shows exceptional spatial reasoning, innovative tactical thinking, and leadership potential that merits advanced development." "Then why?" asked Lieutenant Vasquez. "Do you seem surprised that we want to learn from you?" The question cut to the heart of Jam's internal struggle. She could see her capabilities objectively in the data, but emotionally she still felt like the 19-year-old who had been told she was too young and inexperienced to handle the responsibilities she had been given. "Because I made mistakes," Jam said quietly. "I lost someone who trusted me." Lieutenant Commander Kim leaned forward. "Ma'am, with respect, we've all lost people. That's the nature of military aviation. The question isn't whether you're perfect, it's whether you can teach us to be better than we would be without you." Captain Martinez, who had been observing quietly, spoke up. "Phoenix, 12 years ago, you thought you didn't deserve to be here because you were too young. Now you think you don't deserve to be here because you've been away too long. Do you see the pattern?" The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Jam had spent her career finding reasons why she didn't deserve the recognition and opportunity she had earned. "The Phoenix Initiative exists," Admiral Stone explained, "because naval aviation needs pilots who can think beyond conventional limitations. But more importantly, it needs instructors who can teach that kind of thinking." She gestured toward the assembled pilots. "These 12 represent the most promising tactical innovators we've identified in a decade, but they've been developing their capabilities in isolation, trying to recreate insights you achieved naturally. We need you to teach us how to see what you see," Lieutenant Kim said directly. "Not just the techniques, but the mindset that creates them." Admiral Stone opened a final folder. "Phoenix, I'm offering you command of the Phoenix Initiative, full autonomy to develop training protocols, select candidates, and advance tactical innovation according to your vision. The position comes with a promotion to commander, an assignment to classified programs that will define air combat for the next generation. The offer was everything Jam had never dared to imagine. The opportunity to shape the future of naval aviation, to mentor the next generation of tactical innovators, to transform her personal innovations into institutional knowledge. "What if I'm not ready?" she asked. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Vasquez said with a grin, "you've been ready since you were 19. You just needed to stop being afraid of your own excellence." For the first time since Sarah's death, Jam began to consider that maybe her greatest contribution wouldn't be individual achievement, but empowering others to achieve greatness themselves. "When do we start?" she asked. Admiral Stone smiled. "Phoenix, we started 12 years ago. Now we're just waiting for you to catch up." Months later, Commander Jamila Phoenix Kowalski stood on the flight line at Naval Air Station Fallon, watching her Phoenix Initiative pilots prepare for their graduation exercise. The Nevada sun beat down on the tarmac, just as it had when she was 19. But everything else had changed. "Phoenix Control, Lightning Flight is ready for final exercise," came Lieutenant Commander Kim's voice through her headset. Kim had emerged as the natural leader among the initiative pilots, displaying the same intuitive tactical awareness that had defined Jam's early career. "Lightning Flight, Phoenix Control," Jam responded, using her new call sign as commander of the program. "Today's scenario will test everything you've learned about adaptive tactical thinking. Remember, there are no perfect solutions, only solutions that work." Through her binoculars, Jam watched 12 F-22 Raptors taxi toward the runway. Each aircraft represented months of intensive training that had transformed promising pilots into tactical innovators capable of redefining air combat doctrine. The exercise was a complex multi-threat scenario that had been deemed impossible by conventional training standards. Jam had designed it specifically to force her pilots beyond traditional thinking, the same approach that had been used to challenge her over a decade ago. "Phoenix Control, Lightning 1, requesting permission to brief tactical modification." Kim's voice carried the confidence of a pilot who had learned to trust her instincts. "Lightning 1, approved. What's your assessment?" "Phoenix Control, recommends splitting formation into 3 elements instead of 2. Use vertical separation to create overlapping fields of fire while maintaining stealth positioning." Jam smiled, recognizing the innovation. Kim had just developed a tactical solution that improved on standard doctrine, exactly what the Phoenix Initiative was designed to achieve. "Lightning 1, approved. Execute modified formation." As the exercise unfolded, Jam found herself watching the next generation of tactical innovators discover their own capabilities. Lieutenant Vasquez improvised a rescue coordination that saved 2 simulated downed pilots. Lieutenant Rodriguez developed an electronic warfare technique that neutralized enemy radar systems. Each pilot was pushing beyond what they had thought possible. Admiral Stone joined Jam in the observation tower, carrying a folder marked with security classifications that indicated major developments. "Phoenix, the Joint Chiefs have reviewed the Phoenix Initiative's results. They're impressed enough to expand the program to include Air Force and Marine aviators." "How impressed?" Jam asked, not taking her eyes off the exercise. "Impressed enough to approve the development of Phoenix Squadron, an operational unit that will implement your tactical innovations in real-world scenarios." The implications were staggering. What had started as a training program was evolving into an elite operational unit that would carry Jam's innovations into actual combat situations. "There's more," Stone continued. "The classified aircraft we showed you earlier, they're approved for operational testing, with Phoenix Squadron as the primary test unit." On the radio, the exercise was reaching its climax. The Phoenix Initiative pilots had successfully completed an impossible scenario through tactical innovations that demonstrated everything Jam had hoped to teach them. "Phoenix Control, Lightning Flight, mission complete. All objectives achieved through adaptive tactical employment. Lightning Flight, Phoenix Control, outstanding execution, return to base." As the aircraft landed, Jam reflected on the journey that had brought her from a maintenance hangar in Germany to commanding the Navy's most advanced tactical training program. 12 years of hiding had ended with acceptance of responsibilities she had always been meant to carry. Admiral Stone handed her the classified folder. Phoenix, you have a choice to make. Phoenix Squadron will need a commanding officer who understands both tactical innovation and operational leadership. Jam opened the folder to find orders promoting her to captain and assigning her command of the new squadron. The position represented everything she had once thought she didn't deserve: operational command, cutting-edge aircraft, and responsibility for pushing the boundaries of air combat capability. Ma'am, she said to Stone, 12 years ago, I thought I wasn't good enough to lead pilots into combat. Now I know that leadership isn't about being perfect. It's about empowering others to achieve their potential. Stone nodded approvingly. That's exactly why you're the right person for this command. As the Phoenix Initiative pilots celebrated their graduation, Jam realized that her story had come full circle. She had started as an exceptional young pilot who had been afraid of her own capabilities. She had hidden for 12 years, convinced that her talents were dangerous. Now she understood that her greatest contribution was a sim